We recently had our full day Fintech marketing conference here in London, and it was our biggest one yet. It was a full day that I co-organized with Annie. We do these every year, but yeah, this one was bigger and it was really fantastic, a great day. And one theme kept coming up. With AI, remote work, just more tech in general in our lives, in-person events are becoming more important than ever. And that means that they're becoming a bigger part of the marketing stack for B2B fintech marketers. Whether it's sponsoring, having a booth, or organizing your own events. And I think they're only going to get more important. But managing B2B and the whole world of B2B fintech events can really be a minefield. There's so many to choose from, and different events will help you meet different goals. So it's really important to have expectations there. So how can you get it right? What does success look like when it comes to doing events as a fintech? That's what we cover in today's episode with Nikolay Sabev, a leading fintech growth strategist and marketing expert with over a decade of experience driving commercial growth and brand innovation across fintech, financial services, and digital platforms. He's played a pivotal role in building and scaling marketing functions for high-growth companies, most notably helping shape the go-to-market strategy and brand presence of fintech company Paynetics, a leading European embedded finance provider. In this episode, we talk about how to pick which events to go to. Should you go to the large ones, the small ones, vertical, horizontal, the power of satellite events to help you meet your sales goals, how to stand out at large events like Money 2020, and what are the type of speaking engagements that work best. I really enjoyed this episode, and I hope you do too. You're listening to the Market Like a Fintech podcast. My name is Araminta, MD at Mint Studios and partner at the Fintech Marketing Hub. And with this podcast, my aim is to explore the strategies and tactics that top marketers around the world use to grow fintech companies. We have discussions about how to navigate compliance, the intricacies of marketing technical products, and targeting hard-to-reach ideal customers. All of that while living the startup life. I hope you enjoy this episode. So I'd love, Nick, to start with events. If anyone goes to your LinkedIn and scrolls, we'll see that you attend a lot of events, you speak at a lot of events, you've helped the companies that you work at organize and, I guess, go to events and sponsor events. So let's start with that. What would you say, well, just for the listener and for me as well, what would you say is your experience with events in the B2B space and B2B fintech space specifically? And yeah, what have you found a little bit works there, or what do you think is really valuable about events?
Yeah, as you mentioned, my experience is all different sides of event going. So visitor, organizer, exhibitor, speaker, that actually truly enjoy. And every time it's just, depending on your strategy, like how you go there, you go to speak or you go to meet people, you're going to go for a lead generation, etc. It takes a different shape, the event. I think one of the important things when I go to events or a team member goes to events is really to strategize the purpose, why you go there, do a bit of a research. I think it's quite important to actually know who is going to be there and target audience of the event you're going to. Whether it's a speaking opportunity or lead generation or you just have a booth there. So from my experience, I've been to kind of most of the fintech events that happen, mostly Europe and the UK, because I've been involved heavily in the markets there. There are different sizes depending on the companies going there. Each of these events have a different appeal in a way. So you have the large conferences like Money 2020, etc., that have a specific side to them. At the same time, you have a mid-level or even smaller events that they offer different kind of opportunities. So I think it's all about really mapping out why you go there and what you can achieve. If you do a bit of planning before, I think it always helps in a way after that.
Yeah, I'm seeing quite a few marketers in this space are investing less in the bigger events. They're getting a little bit tired of those and doing more smaller community-driven niche events. Do you have an opinion on which one's better or when it makes sense to do one versus the other?
Yeah, it's a topic I've been discussing a lot recently in a way. I think there is no one magical formula which event works best for everyone. For example, I understand the point of the big events and not having appeal to every single company, but imagine if you're like one of these huge fintech brands, they gotta be there, right? Like if you're MasterCard or Visa or AE or Stripe, there is no way if your main competitor that you're fighting off goes there with a huge booth, there's no way that you don't go there. So I think for bigger brands, the big events are very important, even for just presence, right? I do get the point about smaller events being a little more productive for companies who maybe do not have like huge budgets and they need to actually make a decision. And we're getting back to the point that I mentioned in the beginning, that it's very important to map out initially, obviously having the budget in mind, but map out what can you achieve from these kind of events. I had an interesting experience with Paynetics for Money 2020, for example. Last year we had a booth there, right? It was we invested quite a lot in having a booth, like at the event itself. This year we totally changed the strategy. We got rid of the idea of a booth and we organized a satellite event, which in our case worked out much better, because it was purely for lead generation. So I think bigger events tend to help a lot for brand building and reputation. Smaller and mid-sized events, they're much, much better for actually relationship building, which is extreme.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Can you tell us a bit more about this satellite event? So what was the event? What was the satellite event? What did it consist of? What did you do? And also, how did you try and get the people you were targeting in that room?
Yeah. Oh, it was interesting. It was quite recent. It actually happened in June. Yeah. So I was running it from the side of Paynetics, and it was done in cooperation with ACI Worldwide, like leading payment gateway. That was sort of a partnership in terms of organization, and we decided to have booked a smaller venue up to 100 people, targeted specifically to payment service providers, like a core target audience. It wasn't really marketed publicly. Mm-hmm. It was very much a personal approach to every single invitee that we wanted to actually get there. And it worked out. It worked out in a great way to actually bring the people. One of the good things about these huge events like Money 2020, Pay 360, MP, Berlin, and so on is that it's quite clever if you actually manage to do a satellite event during that time, because you use the fact that so many people from the industry are there. As long as you don't do them on the last day when everyone is going to the after party and the show part of things, you actually have a good chance of getting a lot of people from the conference itself. So in that case, it worked out. We also, as a marketing tool, we did a white paper.
Nice.
That was on, it was actually on, I think it was titled PSPs of the Future or something like that. It was, talking about the idea of PSPs. They need to be a one-stop shop nowadays in order to remain competitive, etc. So like a content piece that's quite relevant to the people coming to the event. And we even printed it out. It was like a nice booklet that we were giving away to people attending the event. Obviously after that, it was kind of distributed more vastly on the web. But with this event, it was really sales driven, sales purpose, having this sort of people that we want to, get on the pipeline for sales. So not that much of brand building and brand awareness. But, as I said, there is a different avenues you can go towards in terms of if you want to pursue just sales, if you want to do some more strategic long-term direction you want to go. I think talking about some traps that a lot of fintech companies, they actually fall into with events is that usually they just treat them as a lead capture opportunities only. So they're we're just going to go there. We're going to put the salespeople on the floor. We're going to just lock in meetings. But I think, as a CMO, I think it's quite important to really pitch the value of go to an event just from brand awareness and strategic point of view, just to be present there, because there is and it's a long-term thing. Sometimes you have to be, especially if you're a bigger brand, you have to be every year, as I mentioned, to this kind of events to become this sort of a top of mind for the visitors. I was at Slush last year. It was a great event. Have you been there? Do you know it?
No, but it looks great. I would love to go one day.
So it's actually it's amazing. So it's not that much of fintech. It has all sorts of different things. But when I was going there, I saw like a huge booth of like Visa, and I was like, okay, now Mastercard must be around, and you see them just on the other side. As a visitor, you expect to see specific brands there, and I think these guys, they just do it because they have to be there, and people expect that. So yeah, but I think with the satellite event is something that I'm not sure your experience, but to me it happens quite a lot recently. A lot of companies, especially like mid-sized, smaller ones, they turn to this instead of investing into having a booth at a big event.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right about if you're a really big brand, you just have to be there. But I think most people listening to this podcast are probably going to be at smaller or mid-market. And so then it's a little bit harder to kind of justify a little bit a booth just because everyone else is there. So I think maybe doing both, right? Doing the satellite thing is also really smart. How many people did you invite to your satellite event, and what did the event consist of? Was it just networking, or was there a talk, or was there a fireside chat? What else happened
It was
within the event?
it was mostly networking and chatting over drinks. So because, as I said, during an event like Money 2020, you have so many things happening.
Yeah.
So you actually, as a smaller brand, you compete with big names like Revolut or Visa or Mastercard, and they do like all these kind of like workshops and talks, and you're literally having like maybe an hour and a half in between the sort of like a day conference before like dinner stuff to actually get these people to stop by, have a quick chat. So you have to keep in mind this thing. So it was more like a chat and meeting people. Obviously, the white paper was handed out, and it was kind of like a premiere of the white paper thing. But yeah, from invitation point of view, it was maybe around 120 people invited, and 80% of them like showed. So quite good. But it was as I mentioned, I like this idea of having a personal approach to people who might be coming to events, and at the same time, that goes for the post-event follow-up as well. Usually when I meet someone at the event, I do the follow-up myself. I don't use like some sort of like automatic software to do that for me. So I think, because there's the initial touch point, you meet them at the event, but, you have 5, 10, 15 minutes to have a quick chat. Then the most important part is, timely follow-up after that and take it from there.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really interesting that all this worked so well because... especially at our conference that we just had a couple of weeks ago, Fintech Marketing Conference, a lot of people were saying, especially with AI and technology, more and more people are craving this in-person type connection. And so I think if you're going to go to events, hosting an event and trying to enable those is really, it can go really far, right? Because you're kind of enabling those human connections.
I think, I've always wondered, for example, if you do like smaller event for like 100 people, I've always wondered when companies, they use these automated softwares to email. You can literally like sit down and, at least to half of these people that you have met, you can like tailor like a message and just send them out, whether it's LinkedIn or email, because it really makes a difference, right? It really makes a difference. And you're right, because the AI now kind of taking over everything, people are really getting back to that personal contact. Mentioning your event, it was great. And I was so happy that you guys invited me to speak there. It was amazing, and I do enjoy this kind of like. How many people were there? Maybe 150. Was it like?
No, about 100. Yeah.
I mean, it was these events are great, and they're actually much more productive because. And also you have created this sort of a community of people, and they kind of know each other in a way, but at the same time, they're always like new faces coming in. And although I didn't have that much time because I had to fly in and speak and fly out this time, but. It was great to see the vibe, and I think it's very, very useful, especially for like marketing communities in the fintech. So that's the best thing about smaller events. And honestly, talking about small and mid-sized fintech companies, I would definitely recommend going for this much better value for money to go for this sort of like a gathering, like a very structured, whether if it's a satellite event with drinks or whether if it's like a workshop. At Slush, for example, there were very nice workshops by some fintech brands. I think it was Solaris or someone else did it, or Swan maybe. It was like a room with 20 people, and I ended up there, and it was incredible to actually meet even like people from competitor companies, and they were having like super healthy and productive discussions. And I literally missed like maybe 2 or 3 lectures on the main stage to actually go there because I saw the value. So I think
Wow.
these little things are much, much better because you actually gain more value out of it. Otherwise, you spend your whole budget, as you said, for a small company going having a booth because the prices are going up all the time there. I don't think it really makes sense. Even like bigger companies, I hear they're actually giving up on that
Wow. Really?
thing, because they just don't see the real value of it.
Yeah, so I think here what we're hearing is, for your Money 2020, like the big events, it's worth doing satellite events. If you've got like a brand goal and also a sales goal, it's worth doing both. If, say, you're going to a smaller event or conference like a Fintech Talents or Pay 360, what do you think is a way to make the most of those where I don't know if there's enough people really to do a satellite event. Maybe there is, I don't know. But maybe you have a booth there. So what would you say there is the best approach to making the most of it?
I think, as I said, preparation is very important. So if you go to, what we were doing, and like team-wise, initially we'll create a calendar with all the events that we want to go to and attend. And I'm talking about just visiting events, and we'll kind of like split them into, obviously you have the vertical and the horizontal events, and we'll then decide who is going to who, whether it is an event for sales only, whether it's an event for marketing or for account management. So usually what I was doing was doing like huge research on who's actually going to be there. Some events, they do share the sort of, at least the companies who are attending, so you can actually kind of prepare yourself and see, they're going to be interesting, maybe potential for a chat over there. But yeah, one other thing I actually thought about is that last year we partnered up also with Visa to sponsor a small event in Berlin. There's this guy called Lars Marco. Have you heard of him? So he runs this incredibly insightful newsletter called Embedded Finance Review. It's mostly for embedded payments, embedded finance. But yeah, if you haven't registered, I would recommend you to do that because he's very much delving deep, not just embedded finance, but also some sort of verticals, so embedded lending, embedded payments. And we did a event with him. We wanted to use the platform as some sort of like a way to reach like wider audience. And it was a small event, around maybe 50 to 60 people, happening in Berlin during the SaaS week. See, another thing, so we used the fact that there was a bigger event happening in town. We did not do anything on that event. It wasn't even like the audience for us. But at the same time, we organized this event with Lars, and we invited like the best minds of embedded finance. It was amazing to actually put these people in the room and have these sort of like very insightful discussions. And again, something that's not extremely expensive, but it works when you actually find a vessel in a way, in that sense. So, let's reach out to Lars and, we can do something together. It's not about being super expensive. It's about connecting with the right person and actually getting the right people there. Yeah, me and him, we formed some sort of a nice friendship since then. So we're
Cool.
working on some things, and he lives in Berlin. I used to live in Berlin. It's like my second home. So I think, clever thing for smaller companies is actually to identify people like that who are sort of opinion leaders in a way in the fintech space, and somehow try to do a partnership with them in a way, like any kind of, sometimes can be an organic partnership. But it really helps because, most of these guys are trustful resources.
Yeah, I think that's a really great approach to do side events with also influencers, because then you get like also to for them to bring in a bit of their audience. Just to go back to kind of booths and stuff. So I think one challenge a lot of companies have is they invest in a booth. So say you've got your satellite event, all that is great. So you're hopefully using that to hit your sales targets or whatever. But, if you're going to do a booth, what have you seen works there? Because I think one of the risks is you just put the money and it's a pretty bland booth and you just look like everyone else. And that is probably not going to help with brand building or with the sales targets either. So what have you seen? What are the kind of booths that you've built at Paynetics, and what have you seen kind of works in terms of standing out here?
Yeah, I think this is actually a very complicated question. So I think, again, going back, if you're like a huge brand and you have like limitless amount, it's kind of easy to get this creative agency that's going to make you like a proper stage out there, right? But if you're a smaller brand, then usually you get this, I think, 3x3 booths. That's what we got. you can't do that much, can you? Like it's a tiny space, and like you can try to make it like as beautiful as possible, but you can try to, you know, put some sort of like an engaging swag materials there, but still most companies they do pens and like power banks and anti-stress bows over there. The anti-stress bow, I think it works. I kind of like it, but yeah, you know, I think I'm not sure if it's about so much about the boot itself, but it's about, I personally sometimes when I go and chat up people at booths at conferences, I've seen that some of the people that are sent there, I'm not sure if it's 100% the right people to be there. So they kind of like know the top line of the product itself, but I would like to see more actually engaged people with the brand and the product. So what I'm talking about is something that is a trend happening now. I think I mentioned it in the panel that was part of your event. It's about this personal branding and actually identifying people from the company, like C-level people that can actually be brand ambassadors or brand evangelists in a way. So a couple of weeks ago, I was in Dublin and I spoke with a friend at HubSpot. They've been doing something extremely interesting now. So they have identified 7 to 8, I think, C-level people, and they have pushed like big time their profiles on LinkedIn. And if you go to these guys' profiles, they have like 20,000+ followers, and they push like a lot of personal content, positioning themselves as a knowledgeable thought leaders in a way. So going back to your question about the booth, I would love to see these kind of people at the booths, you know, or
influencers.
Yeah, exactly. Because, you know, I think it's always been fascinating for me that some brands, they manage to, you know, put a face next to the brand. People like to have that, like, you know, back in the days you had Richard Branson with Virgin and Steve Jobs with Apple, and more to present day with Fintech, you have Nick Storonsky, Revolut, right? Like this guy, his pockets slush, and in an interesting way, he's super interesting, right? And super attractive, and he's the face that people connect with Revolut. So I think even if you're a smaller brand, you can still try to do that. Try to identify, not every single person is comfortable to be on stage or like a podcast or whatever, but usually at least, you know, some of them will be. And I think that's a great thing. And then if you build this and you can complement that with, you know, sending this person to a booth, right? And I think, you know, you see the different value now, even though the booth is small, tiny, but then if you see this kind of recognizable person, you can, you know, stop by, have a chat. And obviously these guys, they can really sell you the product, or they can really like, you know, make this first touch point very productive that you can, you know, put a basis on and continue. But again, other thing, you know, like it depends on what you sell, right? So if your service is something that can be tested, I would always love to see at a booth actually an opportunity to really see the product that the brand is selling, right? Not just having a brochure or 2 people that can explain it to me, but some products, I understand that not every service can be, you know, test driven for 5 minutes at a booth, right? But at the same time, if this is allowed in a way, I would love to see it. So I'm talking about a bit more interactive way of showcasing what you're doing, because you can get creative. Again, 3x3 is a small space, but like you can get creative with what you have there and in a way to show the service that you do. So I think it's, you know, it's about a mixture of creativity, sending the right people as well, and maybe producing a bit more engaging swap materials, because you cannot completely like go without them, right?
Yeah. I remember reading a kind of a guide by these, I think it was a CFO or COO, I think, of Brex, and how they were able to, I mean, they had huge funding, obviously, but still, they were able to get so much more out of SaaSter, which is this huge SaaS conference in the US. Yeah. And they just had like wacky ideas, and they just put a group of people together in a room with a whiteboard, and they were like, go crazy. What would you put? And they came up with like a magician. They came up with breakfast burritos. So like burritos with Brex in them.
I like that.
And a bunch of other funny ideas. And I think, you know, it is gimmicky, but at the same time, that is what catches people's attention. And it's better to be a little bit gimmicky if you want to, better than that, than just being like everyone else. And if you don't have the Visa brand, the MasterCard brand, then this is a way to stand out and to be memorable. I don't know if what are some of the gimmicky things that you've done at Paynetics or at previous companies? What have you seen has been good for catching?
With Paynetics, not that much because we were kind of like a little bit straightforward with these things. But I spent back in the days when I worked in Berlin, I spent 4 years working for Booking.com. So not that much with fintech, but it was interesting time for me because it was between 2012 2016 when Booking.com was just about to be purchased by Priceline. So they were still having this sort of like startup mindsets. They were investing a lot in like different booths and conferences, etc. So I think one time there was a conference that they built like a whole like a Booking.com town with different like attractions inside, some sort of like roller coasters or whatever. So I think I like the idea of being creative and going crazy, but at the same time, first of all, you have to be brave as a company, as a brand. Sometimes
Yeah.
as a CMO, if you go to other C-level people, sit on a table and suggest these ideas, especially fintech space is still a tech space, but sometimes the fin part of it is a little bit conservative. So you don't
Yeah,
really
true.
get like a green light for all the crazy ideas.
No.
And again, it depends on the brand. Like, for example, going back to Richard Branson and Virgin, these guys were doing an incredible job and they were kind of like, at the forefront of creative marketing ideas. So people are connecting Virgin with freshness, with something like creative and crazy in a way. Ryanair are similar at the moment. But if you're like some sort of a B2B fintech brand, you got to be careful because especially if you have a lot of like, compliance and legal side of your business,
Yeah,
you
true.
don't want to be, you have to, you don't want to be accepted as someone who is like, going and building up like a roller coaster tycoon part at an event. So it all depends on your brand. Willingness of the company in general to be brave and kind of push forward
Yeah.
in terms of like creative ideas and marketing, and also your audience. So your example you gave is amazing, and I guess the brand knew that their audience and target audience might enjoy that thing. So again, if you believe in that, I totally support it. But I've had situations where I've suggested these sort of creative ideas, and sometimes they were like turned down
Yeah.
just because not every
Fintech is
company wants
different,
to
maybe.
risk it out. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, makes sense. The other part of kind of events and stuff is speaking, right? And I know as the marketing person, it's quite rare actually for you to speak. So it was nice that you were able to speak at ours a couple of weeks ago. Usually you're trying to get other people in your team to speak, right? So what have you seen works a little bit? Trying to get on stage at Money 2020, or some of these other events. Do you have you worked on that? Tried to get people on your team to speak at these events,
Yeah.
and have you seen that work in any way, like as in, I don't know, like what would you
Yeah.
say is the benefit of doing these kind of things, and what have you seen as a result?
Yeah, I mean, for all these big events like Money 2020 slash, etc., I think it's no secret that almost every single speaking opportunity goes along with a sponsorship package,
Yeah.
which in a way, it's a bummer, but at the same time, it makes sense because a lot of these events, they fund themselves through that. Again, if you're Nick Storansky or someone that level, I'm sure you don't pay, right? But
Yeah.
there are like very limited number of people who can afford to do that. Every time I've been in contact, because I've been in contact with all these big events for speaking opportunities, etc., it was a question of having some sort of package to speak there. With Slush, we actually had a speaker there, but again, it was through a package of some like a sponsorship deal. I personally, in my case, for the last year and a half, I've been quite active speaking around. Usually it's earned media, which I enjoy actually, and I think that's the best thing to do. And I enjoy it. For me, it wasn't like it happened kind of, on the go in a way. For example, the first opportunities were booked through our PR agency. Again, it wasn't a paid one, so you're definitely absolutely it's possible to find a speaking slot
Yeah.
that you don't
Start
have
small, I guess.
pay for. Yeah, I mean, some of them even like because so I spoke at this event in London as well. Was it April? It was called Financial Promoter, so it was kind of like a
Yep.
bigger one. So I was there. It was totally earned media. It was amazing. So it's quite possible to do that, but at the same time, for this huge like top line ones, if you go to the main stage, it's about having the budget to do that. I think is usually with every single new venture, the beginning is the most difficult thing. So
Yeah.
I'm seeing myself after the first few talking opportunities and speaking opportunities, it's kind of like the ball starts rolling. And, if you build like a nice personal branding looking LinkedIn profile, you start to get really approached in a way. And I'm in a sort of situation like that at the moment, and I do enjoy it. For me, being on stage, speaking is nothing extremely new, because as a side life of my fintech corporate career, I've been DJing for 20 years, and
Nice.
I'm kind of like, getting used to be in the eye of the storm, as I like to say. So, DJing helps you a lot, like to switch from everything that happens around you and concentrate on what's happening on stage. And I find it extremely useful. Now, when I go and speak at different events, sometimes it's like 100 people, sometimes few hundred there. But, I manage to switch off and do enjoy that. Because I'm saying this because a lot of people, I've seen, they just struggle really to enjoy being on.
But I guess, the question is more like, if you're trying to get your CEO or your, the executive or the leadership team speaking at some of these events, right? What have you seen? Is it always sponsorship package, or have you tried in any way to get them speaking opportunities aside from, these bigger events or the, other types of events rather than your typical sponsor slash?
The thing is, usually if you're a company that's kind of like aiming to be a market leader in the space, you would usually go to the bigger ones, right? Because they give you like better value in a way in terms of reaching out, etc. So my experience is mostly with this kind of big conferences, because this was part of like a social marketing pillar that we were trying to like pursue. And I just wonder, honestly, if that's going to change or will continue go this way, because I think some events, they are started to like balance out in a way to maybe start providing slots for like non-paid like speakers to be there. But yeah, it really depends on the events. Usually, I found easier to put chief product officers, because they do speak mostly about the service and the products. Some of the CEOs I've worked with, not all of them feel extremely comfortable being on stage, which I believe, if you have a CEO that's kind of like knowledgeable enough and willing to do it, I think it's a great asset to do that. One thing that I have seen works is actually some events, for example, they are willing to offer free slots, but if it's, for example, a CEO, I've had like this situation in a few events in the UK. They're like, okay, we're gonna provide you with like a speaking slot, but it has to be the CEO of the company only. Which makes sense.
Very competitive.
If you have someone like that who is willing to do that, I think it's easier, and you don't have to obviously budget that.
Yeah, no, that's cool. What do you DJ?
I do play techno and house music.
Nice, cool. Very cool.
It helps me balance out with my corporate life, but they need to run both together in order to sustain themselves. So I cannot do just one of them. They have to be kind of balanced out.
Nice. Fintech, techno. I think one question that a lot of people have is that, you look at the calendar, let's say 2026 of events, and there's so many. Right, there's so many different ones you've got to, and you've only got a limited budget. How do you kind of prioritize a little bit? How do you decide which ones to go for? And I know, and a lot of marketers will get like emails from their leadership and saying, oh, we should go to this event and we should go to this event. How do you kind of prioritize and decide, okay, we're going to do these ones and maybe those ones, that kind of thing?
If you're really like in the fintech space, Europe, UK, there's some events that you have to go. So you start from there. So I believe that, again, even if you're like a small and mid-sized company, it's still good to visit the big ones. Not all of them. There are like 5 or 6 in Europe, I think. I would say Money 2020, you have the Pay 360 MP, Viva in France, and some others in the UK. At least, couple of them, it's good to be there just to kind of like test the vibe and see what's happening around. And then it all comes to the strategy I told you about. So it's about having marketing, sales work together, very much aligned, in order to map out. Usually what I was doing, we mapped out from December, the whole year, like after that to 12 months, even earlier. So Q4, you start planning, obviously, the entire next year. And then it's about, filtering it down depending on budget again, how many events you can actually attend, and whether if it's worth to attend like all of them or just selected ones, and what you aim. And again, it's about strategy. Like, okay, we're going to send sales to this event. We're going to send marketing over there. We're going to send the CFO somewhere else. Horizontal events, I usually, so like kind of Money 2020, etc. Usually, I think it's more like brand building and a little bit of sales. But vertical events, you have some events for accounting, payroll, like gig economy. So if these are your targets, markets. I think
Yeah.
these are great events, and even they're more beneficial to go there, send some salespeople, because these are the events where actually your core audience will be.
Yeah.
So I think it has to be a healthy balance between like vertical or horizontal events. So industry, like wide industry events, which is more about let's see what the competitors are doing. But actually where you get more business, I believe, is these very specific events where actually your target audience goes. So for example, if you're chasing the gig economy players like Uber, Bolt, etc., if you're selling embedded finance to them, for example, you have to see where they go and you go there. And I think for sales, I think, businesses at the moment are in a situation where obviously it's all about sales now. It's not that much about marketing, unfortunately. It's more about sales and revenue and this kind of like uncertain times now with AI, and everything. So I think these sort of very much industry specific events are going to be a highlight next year. I think a lot of companies, especially smaller ones, will be going there because this is where your potential clients will be. And this is where you can actually, without having a flashy logo around, this is where you can make business and like local use.
Yeah, nice. I think that's a good answer. Like kind of try and balance it between the fintech ones and the vertical specific ones.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the fintech ones are definitely a must. I think if you're based in the UK, it's quite good because you guys have a lot of events happening there.
Yeah.
And I think it's easier to kind of move around, right? Like, but if you're based somewhere else in Europe, then obviously you cannot send your team all the time. Okay, so you have to like prioritize. In our case, we were definitely doing Pay 360 in the UK, that was for sure. We were part of this some sort of associations like Payment Association. They were doing some smaller events, again, where you can actually meet potential clients. So I think you just have to mix it out, and it's about strategic road mapping the process.
Yeah, nice. Okay, fantastic. I'd like to end on a fun. I think an interesting question. Are there any mistakes that you've made when doing events or any failures that you can share? You can keep it anonymous if that's easier, but I think we learn a lot from the mistakes of others. So anything that you tried with an event and it just completely flopped or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, the swag thing has always been an issue for me. Like, I can never decide what to send over there as a merchandise. Sometimes you have this like handy and like very nice things, but they just disappear after 1 hour of being in the booth because people get them, and then you're like 2 days at the conference, like you have nothing on the booth because you haven't planned that in advance. But that's on the funnier side. On a more serious note, I've personally been to events that, as I told you, especially earlier on in my career, I wasn't really doing this sort of a homework of like going to an event and like researching who is going to be there. I was relying on the fact that I'll walk around, make a few circles, but it's an event with like 4,000 people. And then you don't really like, you end up there walking around realizing you don't know why you're there. And that's a big problem because if you haven't really prepared, but that was like years ago when there were now I think there are some apps that you can even like contact before some people and make an arrangement. It's much, much easier. But I do hear feedback from event organizers that not everyone uses them. So you pay like
that's true.
a lot of money for like a pass because these big events are expensive, and then you wouldn't use like the matchmaking app or whatever like that. So I think again going back to preparation, I think it's key because you can easily fall into the situation, especially if you have a budget to spend, to just invest into a booth or a showcase or an event, and then realizing that in the end of the day it was great, but it wasn't really helpful to you. So it's about really knowing what you want to get from a specific B2B fintech event. If it's just pure brand awareness, you're just gonna show up there, say hi, put the logo, or if you just want to go there strategically, wanting to meet specific people, specific companies, so then you can also obviously build up on that afterwards.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And ultimately, I think it's also helpful to know others maybe who have done who have sponsored that event or maybe done booths there. And this is why like our fintech marketing community is so helpful, because you can hear from others who maybe sponsored there and were like, nah, it didn't really work, or yeah, this was a really good event. I think hearing how other marketers have done can be also helpful. right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the good thing about fintech community is that it's quite tight, which is amazing,
Yeah.
and people know each other, and we speak between each other, and I think it's a great thing. Like even at some events, I speak with some competitive companies like marketing, CMO people, and we're very open to each other,
Yeah.
like sharing what worked, what not, and it's a process, like everything. At the moment, we're in a stage where, especially with AI and things kind of like changing. We discussed that at the event that you guys had. It's a bit of a testing the waters now. It's like in a transitional phase. A lot of talk about AI, about SEO disappearing, about just the whole like sales like methods and sales process changing in a way. But I think it's better to have like some sort of a communal vibe to the fintech community, that we can obviously all together try to like solve the issues and the problems and just move on after that.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's why we built that community. Amazing. Well, thanks so much, Nick, for coming on. Really appreciate it. And look forward to hopefully seeing you at a future London event.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening. You can find show notes and information about guests at fintechmarketinghub.com/podcast. And finally, huge thanks to Orama.tv for producing this podcast. We look forward to having you on our next episode.